Back in 1999, Sony made a brilliant business decision to buy the character of Spider-Man, or the rights to it at least, and everything surrounding Spider-Man. And they've made multiple films over the years, and then that led us to modern day, where we are at this place where Sony realized they could not let this cash cow go, so they needed to keep creating films, needed to just keep milking the property for everything it was worth, which made them decide to create this interconnected Spider-Man-less universe about Spider-Man's villains, but no real Spider-Man in it. And we've had 3 of these films drop this year, one of which did really bad with Madam Web, and then we had the 3rd of the Venom films, which I still can't wrap my head around how there were 3, and now we're at Kraven the Hunter. And on its release, it has been announced that Sony's Spider-Man-less Spiderverse is over. So the question is, did they go out with a bang, or is this just another Madam Web scenario? If you were to look at what all the critics are saying and look at the Rotten Tomatoes score that's being touted everywhere and how extremely low it is, you would think that this is one of the worst films ever made, to which there are many content creators that are even calling this the Room of comic book movies. And I'm here to say that if you've heard anyone say anything like this, they're completely and totally full of crap. They are on the same grift that these type of people are always on. It's for the clicks, it's for the attention. This movie isn't that bad. Now, before I get into telling you why this movie isn't the worst thing ever, I want to make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below, leave us some comments on what you think about my commentary about this movie, and then also just, you want to follow us because I keep on top of the latest in entertainment news, and I'm reviewing the newest things that are coming out. And visit Criticless.com. We're an entertainment reviewing platform for reviewing movies and television shows, but I'm going to go ahead and get on into the meat and potatoes of this movie, which is Kraven the Hunter. Now, I mentioned a little bit ago, you might have missed it, but it has been officially announced that Sony's Spiderverse thing is over. It's not happening anymore. This is the last of these, and there have been quite a bit, but they've been mostly ill-received. And now, granted, that is ill-received from the critics. If you take a look here at these Rotten Tomatoes scores gathered and just all the movies that have come out from this connected universe so far, then you'd know that it's been bombed by critics pretty unanimously. What's craziest to me is the fact that Venom Let There Be Carnage is the highest rated of all these, which is one of my least favorites. It's definitely way down in this lower area, but we'll talk about the rest of these movies in a bit. But the fact of the matter is that we are now 6 movies in, and they're done. They've realized that this was a failed experiment, and honestly, thank God, because their plan was just this ramshackled thing that they'd put together that they clearly had no idea what they were doing and got all of the wrong people involved. So I guess it's a good thing that it's over. Now, that brings me to this movie specifically, and with Kraven the Hunter, I was actually a bit excited once I saw the director attached, the talent attached to it. Granted, cautiously optimistic at best, simply because of how all of these movies have been. But the fact that J.C. Chandor is actually who made this got me fairly excited, because I really liked his movie Triple Frontier. I thought it was a really solid film. I didn't see A Most Violent Year, but I know that Deepwater Horizon's not too bad. All Is Lost is a great film. So, I mean, he was coming off of Triple Frontier, which I liked a lot. So that boded well for the movie. And then we also had Aaron Taylor Johnson, who is fantastic and is really just working his way up in this action sphere of making him to be a certain type of perceived actor, which is, you know, this action guy. And there are rumors floating around that he's going to be the next Bond, which I could be on board with. He's just doing great work lately. But also, they had Russell Crowe in this, and we never see the guy anymore. He goes in and out of being canceled by Hollywood, but he showed up, and so between the 2 of these guys being in this movie, I was pretty interested, and then they slapped an R rating on it. Now, if you didn't know, this movie's been pushed back forever. It was supposed to come out a very long time ago, and it's finally made it to theaters, but with it getting this R rating, I was like, holy crap, they finally just done it. We have all of these movies based off of villains, and none of them are rated R. They're played fairly safe, and they haven't been liked very much. Why not just take a risk? Now, like I was talking about with all the previous films, the first Venom, if you were to look on Criticless, our reviews, as far as that goes, are higher than Rotten Tomatoes and sites like this because most of the general audience liked the Venom movies okay. Granted, I think that Let There Be Carnage was the worst, and then the newest one was fairly well received as well. They're all in this decent range. But then you get into things like Madam Web, which is at an 18% on Criticless, and Morbius, which is at a 29%. And I think all of our audience scores collected for these movies are fairly spot on, and I'm curious to see what shakes out with this specific movie when the rubber meets the road and we have enough reviews in here. But this whole series is hated a lot more by critics than it is by the actual general audience. And after seeing Kraven the Hunter, if you were to ask me, I actually think that this is one of the best films in this series. And I would actually place it at probably around number 2, because for me, I think my favorite now is actually the third of the Venom films because it was just fun. Granted, I came in with very low expectations, but I thought it was more fun than most of these movies have been and didn't take itself too seriously. Now, that's actually kind of a little bit of what hurts Kraven, is that it did take itself very seriously and it could have used a little lightening up. There's a joke or two that actually was kind of funny in the movie, but it's just a very serious film throughout. Now, you'll hear people talking about the writing and the acting and how bad a lot of it is, and I'm here to tell you that most of that is honestly fairly true. There is some really bad acting in this, not necessarily terrible storytelling, more so just very bad writing as far as the dialogue between some of these characters. And when you think about just really cheesy, stiff, awkward things that people are saying, it happens in this movie quite a bit. And it happens not as much from Kraven as it does just other people in the film. And I really do kind of want to point out this guy who was playing the Rhino. It felt there was a lot of overacting happening here, some really weird lines. He was going for it, but what he was going for just didn't work. And there are other parts with Calypso here. There was some lines by her that were really bad. I didn't think she did a terrible job. I thought she was pretty pleasing on screen, but there was just some lines of hers that were really, really bad. Now, when you come to Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Russell Crowe, even when the lines are bad, they're still killing it. They were both great in this movie. I really enjoyed watching both of them. And where this movie really shines is the action, because if you look at all the other films in this series here, Morbius didn't have much action at all. Madam Web literally had zero. And then we have the Venom movies, which people liked the most, which were more action heavy, which is what people go to these superhero type movies for. And they did it here. They did it with Kraven. And they did it in an R-rated fashion. And so that's what hits here, is that this is a guy that uses knives and spears and all these crazy weapons, and he uses it to a good effect. There are some kills in this movie that are absolutely brutal. There are a few guys that get completely and totally eviscerated. So it does make something like this, where it's having falters in other areas, it can at least shine in the action moments, even if they did show it all in the trailers. But all in all, I didn't hate it. I actually had a fairly okay time. As I'm putting in my Criticless review, this was a decent sit. And if you were to ask me where I would rate it on a Criticless scale, I'm going to put it square on that 60 marker. It's not better than the most recent Venom film for me, but it is the lowest of rads. I had a decent enough time, and there were some good nuggets in here. I have a lot of issues with how they kind of restructured a lot of the things with the Spider-Man universe, but at the same time, this is more Spider-Man universe centric than any of these other films. We see a lot of characters introduced in this movie that we have never seen before on screen, and that people have been wanting to see, without me giving spoilers. But this is actually how the rest of this universe should have been playing out the whole time, with the introduction of all these new characters that comic book fans have been familiar with. And they did take a lot of creative liberties. In this movie, Kraven has powers. In the comic books, he doesn't really. But what they did with that, I was mostly okay with. Now, they really do take some liberties with characters like Rhino, and I thought he was okay. A lot of people are really hating on the CG. He only transforms like once for real in the movie, and it was fine. It wasn't nearly as bad as a lot of people have been saying. It wasn't great either, but that fight and everything was totally okay. And there are some other characters in this world teased as well that I thought were fairly well done. This isn't a hateable movie. It's not one of the worst movies ever made. This year has been really bad for film. I have seen some terrible, terrible things. There have been movies that have made me mad, furious that I actually even sat through them because they were so unbearable. This movie's not that. It was a fine sit. Was it great? No. But was it bad? No, not really. I would recommend, when it comes out on streaming, give it a go. Stick it on while you're doing laundry or something, or sit down when you've got a little free time and watch it. It's not going to be a total waste of your time like some of the others with Morbius and Madam Web. There are some real stinkers in this series. So, there are worse ways to go out, and I honestly kind of hate that we aren't getting more of this version of Kraven and maybe getting him into the Spider-Man universe, because this is actually a character that could keep up with and compete with Spider-Man. But the other problem here is the same problem that all of these movies had, which is that they are making Kraven a more compelling, more interesting character, but they make him a good guy, which is a real problem. He could have been compelling and interesting as a bloodthirsty villain, but instead they decided to make him more like the Punisher. This is very much, honestly, a Punisher take on this character, which isn't terrible, I guess. There's worse things they could have done, but also it's not a great approach for this. All these characters were supposed to be villains, and they've tried to convince us that they're not. So I don't know. It's all wishy-washy with this universe, and I just view it all kind of separately from Spider-Man. So do what you will with that. But as far as seeing it in theaters, I don't know. Take your risk on that. But this isn't the worst thing of the year by far, and I've enjoyed it more than quite a few things I've seen so far. So like I said, take it with a grain of salt. I might get some crap for liking this as much as I did, but if you were wanting to know my Criticless official opinion when I drop my review, it is going to be right in that 60 range. And just know that if you're planning on watching it, this still isn't a kid-friendly movie. It is very much a rated R film. But let me know down in the comments below what you thought about Kraven the Hunter, if you liked it, if you wished that the Sony universe was continuing. I am really curious if there are people that do want that, and maybe if they had tied it in with a different Spider-Man, like I don't know, one of the other multiverse Spider-Mans, maybe it could have worked. But let me know in the comments down below what you thought, and make sure to go to criticless.com and drop your review after you've seen it, because we want to get enough reviews in there to get an official score and really know what people think about it. But everybody take it easy, and I will be back next week for some news or some reviews, and we'll see you then. Later.